The city never slept, but that night it watched. Outside the glass walls of one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, luxury moved like a quiet language. Soft lighting, polished floors, voices kept low, not because they had to be, but because they could afford to. Le Chateau Rouge was not just a place to eat, it was a place to be seen, a place where money whispered instead of shouting. Black cars lined the curb. Valets moved with precision. Inside, crystal glasses caught the light like stars trapped indoors. And then, she arrived. Serena Whitfield stepped through the doors without hesitation. No entourage, no announcement, just a woman walking with the calm certainty of someone who knew exactly where she was meant to be. She wasn't overdressed. She wasn't trying to impress. Her presence was quiet, but undeniable. Conversations softened as heads turned, some curious, some confused, some already decided. Serena felt it instantly. Not welcome, not openly rejected, just measured. She walked toward the reception desk, her heels steady against the marble floor. Behind the counter stood Charles Davenport, the restaurant manager. His suit was tailored perfectly, his posture rigid with authority, borrowed from the place he guarded. He looked up. For a second, his smile appeared out of habit. Then it faded. His eyes swept over her, too slowly, not to recognize, but to assess. He glanced at the tablet in front of him, then back at her. "Reservation?" he asked, his voice polite but thin. "Yes," Serena replied calmly. "Under Whitfield." Charles tapped the screen once, then again, longer than necessary. His brow furrowed, not in confusion, but in doubt. "I don't see that name here," he said. Serena waited. She did not rush him. She did not repeat herself. She simply stood there, composed as the seconds stretched. Behind her, a couple shifted impatiently. Somewhere to the left, a soft laugh broke out. From the right, a server paused, watching. Charles finally looked up again. "Are you sure you're at the right location?" he asked. The question hung in the air longer than it should have. Serena met his eyes. There was no anger in hers, no embarrassment, only quiet awareness. "Yes," she said. "I'm sure." Charles offered a tight smile. "Well, tonight is exceptionally busy," he said. "We usually recommend reservations made well in advance." The word usually carried weight. It wasn't about time. It never was. Serena nodded slightly, acknowledging the sentence, but not the intention behind it. Around them, the room continued breathing, forks clinking, wine being poured, soft jazz humming in the background. But the attention had shifted. People were watching now, pretending not to. She could feel their curiosity forming opinions. Who is she? Does she belong here? How long before she's turned away? From a nearby table, a woman leaned back in her chair, swirling her wine with practiced ease. Madeline Sinclair had never needed to whisper to be heard. Confidence made her loud enough. She glanced at Serena, then at Charles, amusement flickering across her face. "This place is getting very diverse tonight," Madeline said, smiling. A few guests chuckled softly. Charles straightened his shoulders, grateful for the distraction. "Perhaps," he said carefully, "we could suggest another evening." Serena turned slowly, looking around the room for the first time. Chandeliers, silk dresses, men in tailored jackets, faces polished by privilege. Then she looked back at Charles. "No," she said gently, "tonight is fine." Her calm unsettled him. He cleared his throat. "I'm afraid without a confirmed reservation, we can't seat you." There it was, not loud, not cruel, just clean enough to deny. Serena nodded once. She did not argue. She did not defend herself. She reached into her bag and slowly placed it back on her shoulder. "I understand," she said. She paused, then added, almost as an afterthought, "I'll give you 20 minutes." Charles blinked. "I'm sorry." Serena met his gaze. 20 minutes, she repeated. "That's all." Before he could respond, she turned and walked toward the exit. A ripple of laughter followed her out. Not malicious, not sympathetic, dismissive. The doors closed behind her, sealing the room back into its comfort. Outside, the night air wrapped around Serena as she stepped onto the sidewalk. The city moved on. Cars passed. Lights flickered. She walked a few steps away from the entrance and sat down on a bench across the street. Only then did she take out her phone. She looked at the screen for a moment, then dialed. When the call connected, her voice was steady. "I'm ready," she said, and she hung up. Across the street, the restaurant glowed. Inside, they believed the moment had passed. They had no idea it had just begun. Inside Le Chateau Rouge, the laughter returned quickly. Moments like that were forgettable to people who had never been on the receiving end. Serena Whitfield was already becoming a joke, a passing story that would be told with wine and smirks. Charles Davenport exhaled, adjusting his cufflinks. The tension he felt earlier dissolved into relief. Order had been restored. The room felt right again. Madeline Sinclair raised her glass. "Well," she said lightly, "that was awkward." A few guests laughed. Someone clinked their glass against hers. Charles forced a smile. "These situations happen," he said. "We have to maintain a certain atmosphere." Madeline leaned back in her chair, satisfied. "Of course," she replied. "Standards are important." Waiters resumed their rhythm. Plates were served. Conversations shifted back to business deals, weekend plans, and places people had been just so others could hear about it. Time moved comfortably, too comfortably. Across the street, Serena sat still. She didn't look at the restaurant anymore. She didn't need to. Her eyes rested on nothing in particular, as if she were watching a memory instead of the present. The phone in her hand remained silent. She wasn't waiting anxiously. She was counting. Inside the restaurant, a server leaned toward Charles. "Sir," he whispered, "there's a car pulling up out front." Charles glanced briefly toward the window. A long black sedan had stopped at the curb. It wasn't unusual. Wealth arrived constantly, but this one didn't rush. The engine cut off smoothly. The door opened slowly. A man stepped out. Dark suit, no flash, no excess. He carried a briefcase. Something about the way he moved drew attention. Not because he demanded it, but because he didn't need to. The doors opened. The man entered. The room shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for people to pause mid-conversation without knowing why. He scanned the room once, his eyes calm and precise. Then he spoke. "I'm looking for the manager," he said. His voice was even, professional, final. Charles straightened immediately. "That would be me," he said, stepping forward with confidence. "How can I help you?" The man nodded slightly. "Daniel Brooks," he said. "Corporate legal counsel." Charles's smile tightened. "What can I do for you, Mr. Brooks?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He opened the briefcase and removed a folder, placing it gently on the counter. "I'm here regarding a transfer of ownership," he said. The word ownership sliced through the air. Charles blinked. "I'm not sure I follow," he said. Daniel opened the folder. "These documents were finalized earlier this evening," he continued. "The process was scheduled weeks ago." Charles leaned in, scanning the pages. His face changed, not suddenly, gradually, like someone watching the ground disappear beneath them. This isn't possible," Charles said quietly. "There must be a mistake." Daniel shook his head. "No mistake," he replied. "The transaction is complete." A hush spread across the room. Madeline lowered her glass slowly. "What's going on?" she whispered to the woman beside her. Daniel closed the folder and looked toward the entrance. "Ms. Serena Whitfield," he said calmly. "May we invite you inside?" Silence. Then the doors opened again. Serena walked in. This time no one laughed, no one spoke. She moved at the same pace as before. Calm, controlled, unchanged. Only the room had changed. Eyes followed her, not with judgment now, but with uncertainty. She stopped a few steps inside. Daniel turned toward her and inclined his head slightly. "Welcome back," he said. Charles stared at her, his mouth slightly open. Serena met his gaze, her expression unreadable. Daniel addressed the room. Le Chateau Rouge, he said, was founded by Edward Langston. A few people nodded. The name carried weight. Before his passing, Daniel continued, Mr. Langston named a successor, someone he trusted to protect the values of this establishment. Daniel turned slightly toward Serena. That successor, he said, is Ms. Whitfield. The room froze. Madeline's glass slipped from her fingers and clinked softly against the table. Charles stepped back. No, he whispered. That can't be right. Serena took one step forward. 20 minutes, she said quietly. No one laughed this time. Daniel closed the folder. As of tonight, he said, Ms. Serena Whitfield is the majority owner of this restaurant. The words settled heavily. Serena looked around the room. The same faces, the same eyes. But now, they saw her, and she saw them. She turned back toward Charles. We'll talk soon, she said calmly. Then she walked deeper into the restaurant, and Power followed her without a sound. The silence inside Le Chateau Rouge felt heavier than the chandeliers above. No music played, no laughter returned. Every movement felt exposed. Serena Whitfield stood at the center of the room, her presence now undeniable. Not because she raised her voice, not because she demanded attention, but because power had finally revealed itself. Daniel Brooks stepped aside, giving her space. Charles Davenport remained frozen, his authority stripped away, without a single word being spoken. Serena looked around slowly. The same tables, the same guests, the same people who had watched her moments earlier with quiet amusement. Now they wouldn't meet her eyes. She walked toward the main dining floor, her steps unhurried. This restaurant, she said, her voice calm but firm, was built on reputation. Heads lifted. Not money, she continued. Not fashion, not names. She paused. Respect. No one spoke. Madeline Sinclair sat rigid in her chair, her confidence gone. She gripped the edge of the table as if it might steady her. Serena turned toward Charles. Tell me, she asked, how many people have you turned away like me? Charles swallowed. I was only following policy, he said weakly. Serena nodded. Policies, she repeated. They're always written to protect someone. She took a step closer. The question is, who? Charles looked down. Serena turned away from him and addressed the room again. I watched, she said, as comfort made you careless. Her gaze passed over Madeline. As power made you loud. Madeline shifted uncomfortably. Serena's voice never rose. I also watched how quickly dignity disappears when it's not convenient. The room felt smaller. Serena gestured gently toward Daniel. Effective immediately, she said. There will be changes. Daniel nodded. Charles Davenport, Serena said, turning back toward him. Your employment here ends tonight. A sharp inhale moved through the room. Charles's face drained of color. You're dismissing me? He asked, disbelief breaking through his voice. Serena met his eyes. I'm correcting a mistake, she replied. Security stepped forward. Charles opened his mouth to protest, then stopped. He knew. Whatever power he had once borrowed from this place was gone. He turned and walked toward the exit without another word. The doors closed behind him. Serena exhaled slowly. She turned toward Madeline. You, Serena said. Madeline looked up, startled. Yes? Serena studied her for a moment. Your table is complimentary tonight, she said. Madeline's shoulders loosened slightly. But, Serena added, this will be your last evening here. Madeline froze. You can't be serious, she said quietly. Serena's voice remained calm. This space was never meant for cruelty disguised as confidence, she replied. You're no longer welcome. Madeline looked around, searching for support. None came. Serena turned away. She walked to the largest table in the room, the one reserved for special guests, the one people waited months to sit at. She took her seat. A server approached nervously. May I get you something to drink, ma'am? He asked. Serena looked at the wine list. May I get you something to drink, ma'am? He asked. Serena looked at the wine list. The Langston Reserve, she said. Open it. The server nodded and hurried away. The room slowly began to breathe again. Conversations resumed, but carefully now, respectfully. Serena lifted her glass once it was poured. She didn't toast. She didn't smile. She simply sat, watching. The narrator's voice softened. They thought power was loud. They thought it arrived with noise and attention. They were wrong. Power walks in quietly, and it stays. The night settled differently after that. Le Chateau Rouge no longer felt like a stage. It felt like a mirror. People spoke softer now, not because they were told to, but because they understood they were being seen. Every laugh carried awareness. Every glance held caution. Serena Whitfield remained seated at the head table, her posture relaxed, her presence steady. She did not rush her meal. She did not acknowledge the stares. She had nothing left to prove. The wine rested untouched for a moment as she looked around the room again. The chandeliers glowed the same way they always had. The music returned, low and tasteful, but the illusion had cracked. Across the room, Madeline Sinclair stood slowly, her chair scraping softly against the floor. She gathered her bag, her movements stiff with disbelief. No one stopped her. As she walked toward the exit, her heels echoed louder than before. Not because they were sharper, but because the room was no longer on her side. The doors closed behind her. Serena finally lifted her glass and took a sip. It tasted exactly as she remembered. A server approached cautiously. "Ms. Whitfield," he said, "would you like the chef to—" "No," Serena replied gently. "This is fine." He nodded and stepped away, relief visible on his face. Daniel Brooks remained nearby, reviewing documents quietly. "They'll talk about this," he said softly. "For a long time." Serena didn't look at him. "They already were," she replied. Daniel paused, then smiled slightly. "Edward would have liked that," he said. At the mention of the name, Serena's gaze shifted. Edward Langston, the man who taught her that wealth was not control, but responsibility. The man who once told her that silence, when chosen, was the loudest statement of all. She remembered sitting across from him years ago, in a smaller room, at a much simpler table. "Never rush your power," he had said. "Let people reveal themselves first." Tonight they had. Serena set her glass down and stood. The room noticed immediately. She didn't address them. She didn't need to. Her authority was already understood. She walked slowly toward the exit, her steps unhurried. Guests parted subtly, instinctively making space. At the door she paused. She turned once, her eyes scanning the room one final time. "Enjoy your evening," she said quietly. And she left. Outside, the city welcomed her back with the same indifference it showed everyone else. Cars passed, lights flickered, life continued, but something had shifted. Inside Le Chateau Rouge, nothing would ever feel the same again, because power had changed hands, and dignity had reclaimed its seat. The following morning, the city woke up unaware. Sunlight poured through glass towers and narrow streets alike, touching everything without judgment. But inside Le Chateau Rouge, the air felt different. Staff gathered quietly, no laughter, no gossip, just tension and curiosity wrapped together. Whispers moved faster than footsteps. Ownership had changed, management had fallen, and no one had raised their voice. Daniel Brooks stood near the bar, speaking in low tones to a small group of senior staff. Papers were signed, instructions were given. There was no chaos, only clarity. Serena Whitfield arrived shortly after. No cameras, no announcement, just presence. She walked through the restaurant slowly, observing details others had overlooked for years. The way staff stood straighter when she passed, the way nervous energy followed her steps. She stopped near the center of the dining room. "This place doesn't need fear to function," she said calmly. "It needs fairness." Eyes lifted. "Every guest who walks through those doors deserves dignity," she continued. "Every employee deserves respect." No applause followed, just understanding. Serena turned toward the kitchen. The chefs watched silently. "You cook excellence," she said. "Make sure you serve humanity with it." They nodded. Outside, news began to travel. Quietly at first, then louder. Not as scandal, but as curiosity. A woman had been humiliated. Then she became the owner. The story moved through private groups, late-night conversations, and selective headlines. People argued over what they had seen. Some denied it, some defended it, but no one forgot it. Back inside the restaurant, Serena sat alone at a table near the window. Not the best one this time, just a seat with light. Daniel approached. "The board supports you fully," he said. "They didn't expect you to act so quietly." Serena smiled faintly. "Noise makes people defensive," she replied. Silence makes them honest. Daniel nodded. Outside, a passerby paused and looked through the window, unaware of who sat inside. Serena met their gaze briefly, then looked away. She didn't need recognition. She had something better. Control. As she stood to leave, she glanced once more at the room. This place would thrive again, but differently. Not as a fortress for ego, as a space for presence. She walked out, the door closing gently behind her, and for the first time, Le Chateau Rouge felt honest. Weeks passed. The city moved on the way it always did, quickly, impatiently, forgetting yesterday's outrage for today's distraction. But Le Chateau Rouge did not return to what it was. It evolved. Reservations were still difficult to get. The wine was still expensive. The lighting was still perfect. But something invisible had changed. The room felt lighter. Guests no longer whispered to feel important. They spoke to be heard. Staff moved with confidence instead of fear. Mistakes were corrected, not punished. And Serena Whitfield was rarely seen. She didn't sit in the spotlight. She didn't host grand openings. She didn't remind anyone who owned the place. Her influence lived in the silence between moments. One evening, a young couple entered the restaurant hesitantly. They weren't dressed for attention. They spoke softly, uncertain. At the desk, the host smiled. "Welcome," he said. "Right this way." No questions, no hesitation. From a quiet corner upstairs, Serena watched briefly, unnoticed, then turned away. That was enough. Daniel Brooks joined her near the railing. "You changed more than a business," he said. "You changed behavior." Serena rested her hands lightly on the rail. "People don't need to be taught humility," she replied. "They just need to be reminded that power is temporary." Daniel nodded. Below them, laughter rose. Natural this time. Not forced, not performative. Serena thought back to that first night. The looks, the judgment, the laughter she hadn't answered. She understood something now. That moment hadn't been about rejection. It had been an invitation. An invitation to decide what kind of power she wanted to be. She had chosen restraint. She had chosen timing. She had chosen dignity. Serena turned and walked toward the exit. As she passed the entrance, a young server hesitated, then spoke. "Ms. Whitfield," he said quietly. "Thank you." She paused. "For what?" she asked. "For seeing us," he replied. Serena smiled. Not for the room, not for the world, but for herself. "You were always visible," she said. "They just forgot how to look." She stepped outside. The city lights welcomed her again, indifferent but honest. Cars passed. Life continued. No applause followed her. No headlines chased her. And she didn't need them. Because true power doesn't arrive with noise. It waits. It watches. And when the moment comes, it owns the room. Thanks for watching. Please, it will be a great thing to subscribe to our channel.